You would never expect a 15-year-old boy to sit in the back of a dusty, half-lit library with his hands trembling over a book he hasn't yet dared to open, but that's exactly where Kaito Nakamura found himself on a cold, quiet Friday afternoon, alone, confused, and clutching a secret no one had prepared him for. He didn't even know why he was shaking, not yet. All he knew was that the moment he pulled that book off the shelf, something inside him shifted. Something he didn't understand but deeply feared. His heart beat fast, too fast, as if his body recognized something he didn't. It wasn't a big book. It wasn't even beautiful. Thin, brown, and worn down by time, the cover looked like it belonged in a museum storage room, not hidden behind a cracked wooden shelf in a forgotten school library. There were no words on the front. Only a symbol, two brush strokes crossing each other at a strange angle, forming something that looked halfway between a character and a warning. He stared at it. He couldn't explain why, but the moment he saw it, one thought punched through his mind: I shouldn't have found this. And yet, he couldn't let it go. He didn't know it yet, not fully, but this was the moment everything in his life began to bend. The moment his sluggish grades, endless confusion, and quiet frustration collided with something ancient, something precise, something that had survived 600 years of silence waiting for someone who needed it badly enough to notice it. He exhaled shakily. Just open it, he whispered to himself. But he didn't, not yet. Because the truth, the part no one tells you, was that Keijo wasn't supposed to be in that library at all. He wasn't supposed to have found the book. And he certainly wasn't supposed to know the secret inside it. A secret older than every class he'd ever taken, older than the school itself, older than most countries. A secret designed in the shadowed corners of medieval Japan, crafted by a single man whose name had nearly been swallowed by history, along with the method that could change nearly everything about the way a person learns. But all of that comes later. Right now, Kaito was just a frustrated teenager who felt like he was slowly drowning in a world moving too fast for him to keep up. He pressed the book to his chest and closed his eyes. He didn't know why, but he felt as if the book was watching him, not threateningly, just waiting. And here's the thing Kaito would only understand much later. It wasn't the book he was afraid of. It was the possibility that whatever was inside could change him forever. He swallowed hard, then finally, with a courage that felt borrowed, he opened it. And that's when everything began. The first page wasn't even a page. It was a sheet of parchment so thin it looked like it would crumble if he breathed too hard. The edges were uneven, browned, torn in places, where time had eaten away at it like hungry teeth. And at the center of the fragile page, there was only a single sentence, not in English, not even in modern Japanese. It looked older, sharper, the kind of brushwork you only see in museums and temples. Kaito squinted, sounding out each character slowly, fingers trembling slightly as he traced the strokes in the air. He who learns too much knows nothing. He who learns correctly forgets nothing. It didn't make sense, at least not to him. He turned the page. This time there were diagrams, circles intersecting, arrows looping, strange geometric shapes that didn't look like math or language. More like maps. But maps of what? He leaned closer. The shapes were meticulously drawn with black ink, but strangely elegant, as if the person who made them wasn't just writing, but carving intention into the page. He didn't know it, but these shapes had a name, one forgotten by time. Shuhari no Sekai, the world of bending. He kept reading. Every page was different, some filled with drawings, some nearly empty, some covered in text so faded that he had to tilt the book toward the window just to catch a glimpse of the symbols. But the strangest part? The book wasn't long, 40 pages at most. It didn't look like enough to teach anything. Not science, not math, not language, nothing. And yet, every page felt heavy, as if it carried more than its words. He flipped to the back, expecting to find a summary, maybe a final note. Instead, he found silence. The last page was blank. No explanation, no ending, nothing. He frowned. Why did this feel intentional? For a moment he just sat there, listening to the soft hum of the library's old fluorescent light. His classmates were long gone by now. School had ended an hour ago. Even the librarian, Mrs. Ayumi, was probably on her way home. He should have been home too, but something in him wouldn't let this go. Maybe because everything else in his life felt like it was letting go. School, drifting, grades, falling, confidence, gone long ago. He wasn't stupid, he wasn't lazy, he just couldn't keep up, no matter how hard he tried. Every time he studied, it felt like water slipping through his fingers. He would cram for hours, only to forget everything the next day. Teachers told him he wasn't paying attention. His father told him he needed to try harder. His classmates didn't even notice when he fell silent in conversations. He had tried everything: notes, flashcards, late nights, tutors his family couldn't afford. Nothing helped. Nothing stuck. So maybe that's why this book felt different. Maybe that's why he couldn't look away. Because somewhere deep inside, in a place he didn't know how to reach, Kaito was desperate. Desperate for something to work. He turned back to the beginning and forced himself to slow down. He read each ink stroke carefully, letting the shapes burn into his memory. A circle, a curved arrow, a single word repeated several times. Todeyu. To drift. Drift? What did drifting have to do with learning? He flipped ahead. More symbols. Shibari. Tying. Kakehashi. Bridging. Mei. Clarity. Page after page, the words floated up at him like whispers from another time. Drift. Tie. Bridge. Clarity. Drift. Tie. Bridge. Clarity. He felt something tightening in his chest. Not fear exactly, but a strange anticipation, like he was walking down a dark hallway, guided by a single flickering lantern. He whispered the words aloud again. Drift. Tie. Bridge. Clarity. It didn't sound like a system. It didn't sound like a method. It didn't sound like anything he heard of, and yet, something inside him reacted to the pattern. Like muscle memory from a life he hadn't lived, he flipped back to the first page, staring at the sentence again, the words that felt too sharp and too intentional to ignore. He who learns too much knows nothing. He who learns correctly forgets nothing. What did that even mean? He rubbed his forehead, frustrated, but then, his eyes drifted down to the corner of the page. He hadn't noticed it before. Barely visible, etched in faint brushstrokes, was a name, or rather, a signature. Just one word, Hoshimi. He whispered it. Hoshimi, and in that moment, he felt it again. That strange, heavy shift inside him, as if the name itself meant something, as if the men behind it was someone he should remember. Someone whose shadow stretched across centuries and had just brushed against him. He didn't know who Hoshimi was, but he was about to. Because nothing in this world, nothing in his life, had prepared him for the weight of the secret that name carried. A secret 600 years old. The secret written for one purpose, to turn ordinary people into something extraordinary. And Kaito had just stepped onto the first page of it. Kaito didn't move for a long time, just sitting cross-legged on the library floor, the book spread across his knees like a fragile altar. The shadows from the flickering fluorescent lights stretched across the walls, making the air feel thinner, older, heavier. Every so often, a floorboard creaked somewhere behind him, but he didn't look up. He couldn't. Something in the quiet pressed against him, a pull he couldn't name, but knew was waiting to be followed. And then, he noticed it. A subtle anomaly in the book, something he hadn't seen the first 24 times he flipped the pages. A small, almost imperceptible red dot in the corner of several diagrams. Sometimes it appeared on a circle, sometimes beside a single brushstroke. He frowned. His finger hovered above it, trembling. Why was it there? He traced one of the dots with his fingertip, and for the briefest second, it felt like the page was vibrating beneath him. Tiny pulses that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. A micro-mystery, the kind you can't ignore. Something was hidden here. Something wasn't being said. It made him shiver. Then he realized it wasn't just the red dots. Every page, every diagram, every word felt deliberate, almost alive. The way the lines curved and intersected, the way the words whispered in an order that didn't make sense at first, was too intentional. It was as if the person who made the book had known exactly who would find it 6 centuries later. Kaito swallowed hard. A thought he didn't want to admit crept into his mind. What if I'm not supposed to understand this yet? The irony of a thought like that made his lips twitch. He wasn't even sure if he feared understanding it or feared not understanding it, because deep down he already felt the pull, a quiet, insistent tug on something inside him that had been dormant for years. He remembered another failure, another forgotten test, another failed attempt to learn something he had thought he loved. He remembered the frustration, the self-loathing, the slow accumulation of invisible scars that come from trying and failing in silence. And then he realized the book wasn't just a book, it was a mirror. Every diagram, every word, every micro-mystery was reflecting him back. Not who he wanted to be, not who he thought he was, but who he truly was. A boy lost in his own impatience. A boy drowning in a modern world that demanded speed over depth, novelty over mastery. A boy desperate to learn without paying the price of discipline. And somewhere, buried under layers of frustration and self-doubt, he recognized the truth. He had been wandering in the wrong path his entire life. The breadcrumb mystery, the red dots, the whispered words, was a guide, a test, a way to measure whether he could stop chasing shortcuts and start following the process. He felt a sudden tightness in his chest, a spike of anxiety that bordered on fear, but it was different from the fear he knew. This fear wasn't about failing, it was about changing. A little voice inside him whispered, "If I follow this, I will not be the same boy who entered this library." And that thought alone made him hesitate, because deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted to change, not yet. But he couldn't stop. He turned the page again, and this time, something even stranger happened. A diagram that had appeared simple before now seemed to shift. The circles and arrows seemed to connect differently as his eyes lingered. He blinked. He leaned closer, and then he noticed it. The small red dots formed a sequence, a path. It was subtle, invisible if you weren't paying attention. But now he was, and he realized, almost in shock, this is a map not of land, not of treasure, not of geography, a map of learning, the way to mastery, 600 years old, hidden, waiting for someone patient enough, desperate enough, brave enough to find it. Kaito felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't going to be easy, not even close. He could feel it in the way the lines demanded his attention, in the weight of the pages, in the silence of the library. Every fiber of the book screamed discipline, patience, obsession, the kind of focus that had been extinct in his generation, the kind of focus he had spent his life avoiding. And yet, somewhere deep inside, part of him thrilled at the challenge. He closed his eyes, let the memory of all the things he had failed at wash over him, all the times he had skipped steps, chased shortcuts, tried to be clever before learning the rules. Roll. The times he had walked away from the basics because they bored him. And then he opened the book again, because the first rule of this ancient secret became suddenly clear. Before you can master anything, you must first destroy the way you think about learning itself. It's not knowledge, it's not intelligence, it's not talent, it's process. And Kaito knew, somehow, that the book would demand everything from him. Not just his time, not just his effort, not even just his patience. It would demand him. The person he had been, impatient, restless, distracted, frustrated, would have to die first. And for the first time in years, Kaito felt both fear and excitement in the same breath. He didn't know it yet, but this was the start of the Shu. The first stage of a secret so powerful that it had been buried for centuries. A stage so precise, so exact, that most people who stumbled upon it would fail simply because they couldn't surrender themselves to the process. And that was exactly the point, because only those willing to obey completely, without question, without ego, without shortcuts, could survive the first stage. And Kaito had just opened the door. The first morning of Shu arrived in a silence so thick, it felt like the air itself had been pressed flat. Kaito stepped into the small chamber, the wooden floor cold beneath his bare feet. The Kend book lay open before him, but it no longer looked like a book. It looked like a teacher. He took a deep breath and glanced at the red dot sequence he had traced a dozen times in the night. Every dot, every line, every brushstroke felt like it carried the weight of centuries. He felt an almost physical pressure, as if the authors of the book were watching, waiting, judging every hesitation. He opened to the first diagram. A simple stroke, a single movement, one line, repeated endlessly. Kaito frowned. This is it? He raised his hand. He imitated the motion, carefully, precisely. It was awkward, clumsy, wrong. The book didn't scold him. It didn't punish him, but the weight of expectation pressed down like a silent blade. He tried again, still wrong, and then again and again. The hours passed in a blur. His arms ached, his shoulders burned. His eyes stung from concentration. Each repetition made him feel smaller, weaker, more fragile. The micro-mystery of the red dots tugged at the back of his mind. Why does this matter? Why is this so precise? But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew the answer wasn't in speed. It wasn't in cleverness. It wasn't in shortcuts. It was in the process itself. The days bled into weeks. Kaito practiced the same stroke hundreds of times a day. He tried variations. He compared angles. He measured distances. He focused on the tiniest detail, the tilt of the wrist, the weight of the hand, the rhythm of the motion. Every tiny deviation was noted, corrected, internalized. He began to notice strange phenomena, small ones, almost imperceptible. His dreams became vivid, not random, but structured. He dreamt of strokes flowing in perfect sequences, red dots glowing softly in the darkness. He would wake in the middle of the night, compelled to move, to replicate the motion in silence, testing the memory of muscles he didn't yet understand. Then came the first micro-twist. One evening, exhausted, he dropped his arm mid-stroke. His hand trembled violently. But instead of the usual frustration, he felt a strange release. It was subtle, almost invisible, a tiny freedom in the motion he hadn't felt before. The book had taught him nothing directly, yet somehow, in failing, he had begun to understand. It was as if the repetition itself was shaping his body, carving grooves into the muscles, the bones, the very structure of thought. Each failure was not punishment. It was a step forward. Weeks turned into months. Kaito's body began to move differently. Movements that had once been clumsy became smooth, automatic. His mind no longer interfered. The conscious struggle, the endless overthinking, faded like mist in the morning sun. He caught a glimpse of it one day in a cracked mirror propped against the wall. His reflection wasn't just a boy learning a stroke. It was someone transformed. Not fully, but enough to feel the difference. The tension in his shoulders had relaxed. The tightness in his chest had loosened. His eyes, once darting and impatient, now held a quiet intensity, like a fire that burned without smoke. And yet, the book kept its secrets close. The red dot sequence had shifted subtly. A connection he hadn't noticed before appeared, a line forming a path between 2 points he had considered unrelated. His pulse quickened. It was a breadcrumb, a test, a challenge. He followed it, and it broke him. Not physically, he could feel his body stronger than ever, but mentally. The stroke he had repeated for months suddenly felt wrong. Every muscle protested, every instinct rebelled. He had been so certain, so confident, and now, nothing worked. Kaito sank to his knees, his forehead pressed against the floor. His body shook. What am I missing? The room stayed silent. The book lay open. The red dots glowed faintly in the lamplight, mocking him. And then, in the stillness, a realization dawned. He had been repeating not for mastery, but for comfort. The repetition that had once freed him now trapped him. He had been obeying blindly, but he had not yet understood. The Shu stage demanded surrender, absolute surrender, not just of skill, but of ego, of expectation, of the desire to feel progress. Kaito clenched his fists, tears burning in his eyes, not of sadness, but of recognition. He had been running from the truth of mastery all along, and suddenly, a shift occurred. The stroke he had been practicing, the sequence he had been obsessing over, became effortless. His body flowed without thought. The micro-mysteries, the red dots, the lines, they all aligned. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't measuring. He wasn't calculating. He was moving. The first stage was complete. He rose, trembling. Exhausted, yes, but different. He could feel it in the subtle way his muscles relaxed, the way his heartbeat had slowed, the way his mind felt unshackled. He had entered the path of mastery, but he knew the book wasn't done with him. The next stage, Ha, would push him further. He would be forced to question, to adapt, to break the foundation he had just built. And only by doing so would the full secret, the 600-year-old learning system, reveal itself. Kaito smiled faintly. Fear lingered, yes. Doubt lingered. But beneath it all, a deep, unwavering resolve had taken root. He was no longer the boy who stumbled upon an ancient book in a forgotten library. He was the student of a secret older than any living memory. And the journey had only just begun. The first light of dawn spilled across the chamber, gilding the wooden floor in faint orange streaks. Kaito entered with the same ritual precision he had developed during Shu, feet aligned, spine straight, hands steady. The red dot sequence awaited him, but something was different. A second book now lay beside the first, its cover plain, unassuming, almost disrespectfully simple. No instructions, no diagrams, only a sentence. Break it, bend it, understand it. Keito's pulse quickened. Ha! The stage of breaking what he thought he knew. For months, Shu had been a sanctuary. Every stroke, every repetition, every failure had been structured, predictable, safe. He had learned to obey without question. The patterns became muscles, the motions a language his body spoke naturally. He had felt progress in every fiber of his being. Now that certainty shattered. He picked up the brush and stared at the first stroke. Something tugged at the edges of his memory. The way his wrist had moved unconsciously yesterday, the subtle curvature his body had found on its own. But the book said, break it, bend it, understand it. He hesitated. The first stroke trembled, distorted. His hand rebelled, the line wavered, blurred, collapsed, and he panicked. What if I destroy everything I built? A faint warmth of dread rose in his chest. His mind, trained for months in perfection, recoiled. His body, accustomed to absolute obedience, resisted. And yet, the tiny spark in the back of his mind whispered, this is the way forward. He drew another line, different, twisted, wrong, brilliant. It hurt to see his perfection undone. The trembling, jagged strokes mocked the countless hours of Shu, but slowly, painfully, a new pattern emerged, one that was alive, responsive, unpredictable. Kaito realized Ha was not destruction. It was understanding through transformation. Over the next weeks, he repeated this cycle endlessly. 1. Copy the original perfectly. 2. Break it deliberately. 3. Observe, feel, internalize the changes. 4. Repeat. The process was maddening. At times, he felt like a traitor to himself. His muscles, trained for perfection, screamed at the chaos. His mind questioned every decision. Why bend what already works? Why break what is mastered? Yet something miraculous happened. The micro-mysteries he had ignored during Shu, the faint inconsistencies in strokes, the invisible curves, the subtle energy in each line became visible. The red dots now danced with intention. They were no longer arbitrary markers. They were guides to something deeper. He began experimenting beyond the instructions, combining strokes, testing sequences that seemed impossible. The lines that once followed rigid structure now interacted, merged and evolved. And then came the first emotional twist. One evening, exhausted and sweating, Kato accidentally combined two strokes in a way the book had never indicated. The result was beautiful, alive, a form he hadn't imagined. He stared at it, disbelief frozen on his face. It wasn't just correct, it transcended correctness. It had meaning, and in that moment, he understood why Shu had been so brutal, so absolute. Without that foundation, he could not have innovated. Without obedience, the chaos of Ha would have been meaningless. He would have been lost, a slave to randomness, unable to perceive the patterns beneath. The Ha stage revealed the terrifying truth. Mastery was not linear. It was a constant loop of building and breaking, of comfort and discomfort, of creation and destruction. Every time he thought he understood, the book, or life itself, presented a new challenge. The psychological tension escalated with every exercise. Sleep became a strange, fleeting thing. His dreams were no longer orderly sequences of red dots. They were storms, lines colliding, shapes exploding, forms emerging and dissolving before he could grasp them. He woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding, mind racing, unable to tell whether he was awake or still dreaming. Yet the pool of Ha was irresistible. Every failure, every unexpected outcome, every moment of discomfort drew him deeper. He began to see connections he hadn't noticed before, the way a curve in one stroke influenced the flow of another, how pressure applied subtly at one point could transform an entire pattern, how absence of control could lead to precision far beyond conscious thought. Small victories appeared like sparks in the darkness. A single stroke flowed exactly as he imagined, without effort, without thought. A combination of lines created a pattern so fluid that his hands seemed to move independently of his mind. But each victory was followed by a new test, a new micro-mystery. A stroke that had worked yesterday suddenly refused to obey. A sequence that seemed mastered now collapsed under scrutiny. Each challenge revealed how fragile even the strongest foundation could be if it was not fully understood. And all the while, the subtle breadcrumbs, the strange alignment of red dots, the faint imperfections in previous strokes, the whispers of patterns he could not yet name, kept him on edge. What is the purpose of this? What am I missing? One day, after a particularly grueling session, he paused and stepped back. Sweat dripped from his brow. His hands shook. He stared at the chaotic lattice of strokes before him. And then, he laughed. Not a triumphant laugh, not a relief laugh, but a laugh of recognition. He was beginning to see the invisible, the lines, the dots, the chaos. They were all part of a chord. Larger structure, a secret older than himself, older than the books, older than the world he knew. Ha was teaching him to see the principle behind the action, not the stroke, not the sequence, not the repetition, the principle. And with that understanding, Kaito stepped onto the threshold of the final stage, the Rai stage, the silent transcendence, where the technique ceases to exist and mastery flows through the body like water. But Rai was not guaranteed. Few ever reached it. Ha could destroy as easily as it could create. Many gave up, frustrated by failure, seduced by the illusion of skill without true understanding. Kaito clenched his fists, feeling every scar, every ache, every failure as proof of progress. He knew the path ahead would test everything he had built, everything he believed, everything he was. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, there was a spark of something unstoppable, a quiet, unwavering certainty that the 600-year-old secret was unfolding within him, stroke by stroke, breath by breath, failure by failure. Kaito was no longer a student blindly following. He was a practitioner, a seeker, a mind awakening to the depths of a secret that had survived centuries, waiting for someone willing to endure the Shu, embrace the Ha, and someday, perhaps transcend into Rai. The dawn was softer now, not the harsh, golden glare of the early days, but a quiet light that filled the chamber with calm. Kaito sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, eyes closed, hands resting lightly on his knees. Months of Ha had shredded his certainty, burned his ego, and rebuilt him in ways he could not yet name. The brush lay untouched beside him. The red dot sequence was open, but it no longer commanded his attention. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he listened to the subtle rhythm of his breath, the tiny hum of the floorboards, the faint vibration of life in the world beyond the chamber. This was Rai, the stage no one could teach, no book could explain. He began to draw, not because he was copying, not because he was testing, not even because he was experimenting. His hands moved as if they were extensions of the air itself. Strokes appeared, vanished, merged, and transformed. He did not decide. He did not judge. He did not control. And yet, the result was perfection. Each line flowed naturally into the next. Every curve, every pause, every empty space, alive with intention. Kaito's body and mind were no longer separate entities. The brush did not obey him. He obeyed nothing. A memory surfaced, a lesson buried beneath layers of repetition. The first day of Shu, when he had learned to obey without question, the countless hours of repetition, the agony of failure, the panic of Ha, the bursts of creation and destruction. Each stage had been necessary. Each stage had brought him to this threshold, where mastery was no longer something he performed, but something that performed through him. Rai was silence. Rai was action. Rai was not doing. Rai was being. The room felt alive. The walls, the floor, the air itself seemed to pulse with recognition. Kaito realized the paradox that had eluded him for so long. Mastery was not accumulation. It was surrender. Not to someone else's rules, but to the truth of the moment. The brush, the dots, the lines, they were not tools. They were mirrors. They reflected the depth of his awareness, the presence of his being, the perfection of engagement without ego. He recalled the words of his teacher during Ha, break, yes, bend, yes, but never forget, the principle is everything. Rai was the principle fully realized, not in thought, not in conscious effort, but as an organic, unstoppable force, born of centuries-old knowledge distilled through the rigor of personal trial. And then came the first soft climax, the internal peak that no outsider could witness. A new pattern emerged on the page, something Kaito had never imagined. It was not the technique, it was beyond technique. The brush moved as though anticipating the future, adapting to invisible forces, dancing in harmony with his heartbeat and breath. For a moment, he felt infinite, no longer bound by red dots, rules, or even intention. Each stroke was right, because it was. A chill ran down his spine. He understood now why masters in every domain spoke of flow, of instinct, of transcendent ability. It was not magic, it was not talent, it was the inevitable outcome of Shu, Ha, and now Rai. Years of repetition, destruction, adaptation, and surrender had wired him in a way that bypassed the conscious mind entirely. The knowledge of the past and the potential of the future coexisted perfectly in every action. A micro-mystery revealed itself. The red dots, which had once been markers, guides, and challenges, now seemed almost irrelevant. And yet, their subtle influence lingered, like echoes beneath the surface of a river. They had shaped him without constraining him. Kaito's mind expanded. He began to see patterns everywhere. The rhythm of the wind, the sway of trees, the way sunlight shifted across the floor. The same principles of movement, balance, and energy that governed the brush applied to life itself. Every interaction, every decision, every skill he had learned, even those unrelated to drawing, now carried the imprint of the secret he had unearthed. He understood why the 600-year-old Japanese learning secret endured. It was not about technique. It was not about mastery alone. It was about transformation, the creation of a person capable of perceiving the world differently, capable of acting naturally and fully in alignment with truth. And here came the quiet landing, the reflective outro, the final thought lingering in the air. Kaito sat back, gaze softening, and whispered to himself, You cannot rush mastery. You cannot skip the foundations. You cannot be clever to avoid humility. The world will give you only what you are ready to receive. He rose, stepping out into the morning light. The air was crisp, the sky vast and open. For the first time in years, he felt fully alive, not because of the lines on the page, not because of skill, not because of recognition, but because he had walked the path, endured the stages, surrendered, and finally discovered himself within the act of mastery. Shu had given him obedience. Ha had given him wisdom. Rai had given him freedom. And that freedom, the silent transcendence, was the true treasure hidden in the 600-year-old secret. Kaito's journey was not an end. It was a mirror for anyone who dared to follow the path, to choose a skill, to submit to its rigors, to break it down, to rebuild it, and to allow mastery to emerge naturally from the depth of experience. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Mastery is not the accumulation of techniques. It is the transformation of the self. And the self that can endure Shu, navigate Ha, and embrace Rai will become something that transcends time, talent, and circumstance. Gato smiled, feeling the calm after years of storm. The secret was no longer hidden. It had been within him all along, waiting for patience, humility, and courage. He walked forward, not as a master of a skill, but as a master of himself. And in that, he realized the ultimate truth. The path does not end, it only deepens. And so, the 600-year-old Japanese learning secret, Shu, Ha, Rai, remained alive, ready to transform anyone willing to endure, willing to obey, willing to break, and willing to transcend.